Chicago wakes up early, and so do the secrets inside this city.
Welcome back to Twisted Love Tales with Mr. Easton. If you're new here, this channel shares powerful love stories about trust, betrayal, and life decisions people face when relationships are tested. Today's story begins with a single message, one that changed a marriage forever. The evening looked ordinary. Most employees at Foster Strategic Consulting had already left for the day. The long hallway outside Arden Foster's office stood quiet, the glass walls reflecting the lights of downtown Chicago across the river. Arden remained at her desk reviewing next week's schedule. Her company had grown quickly during the last 5 years, and her calendar often filled with meetings, investor calls, and travel plans. That was why she hired a personal assistant, Ariana Cross. Organized, efficient, reliable. At least that was what Arden believed. Ariana had stepped out moments earlier to sign for a delivery at reception. "Back in a minute," she said before leaving. Arden reached for Ariana's work phone resting on the desk. She only wanted to confirm the location of a client meeting scheduled for Tuesday morning. Ariana usually kept every detail organized there. The screen lit up. Arden scanned the calendar quickly. Tuesday. Strategy meeting. River, North office. Everything looked correct. Just as she prepared to set the phone down, a new notification appeared across the top of the screen. A text message. The sender name caught her attention immediately. Nicholas. Her husband. At first, Arden assumed it must be a business message. Nicholas ran Foster Dominion Holdings, one of the fastest-growing logistics companies in the country. Work messages appeared on his phone constantly. But the preview line beneath his name stopped her hand. "I miss you already." Arden blinked. For a moment she thought she had read it wrong. Then another message appeared on the screen. "Last night ended too quickly."
They have always known each other.
Arden stared at the phone. Because the message was not sent to her. It was sent to Ariana. Arden stared at the phone in her hand. For a moment, she told herself there had to be a mistake. Nicholas worked with many people. Messages crossed his phone all day. Maybe the message had been sent to the wrong contact. Maybe it meant something else. But another notification appeared. Nicholas again. "Be careful tomorrow. She must not suspect anything." Arden felt the air leave the room. Her thumb moved slowly across the screen. She opened the conversation. A long thread of messages filled the display. Not one or two texts. Dozens. Arden scrolled upward. Her heart beat slower with each line she read. "Nicholas, did you get home safely?" Ariana, "Yes. She stayed late at the office." Nicholas, "I hate pretending nothing is happening." Arden stopped scrolling. Her mind tried to reject the meaning of the words. But the conversation continued. "Nicholas, dinner Thursday might be difficult. I'll leave early." Ariana, "She mentioned the dinner today. Be careful." Arden felt a quiet weight settle in her chest. They were not discussing business. They were discussing her. Her schedule. Her plans. Her life. Arden continued scrolling. Then one message near the middle of the conversation caught her attention. Nicholas had written late the previous night. "Seeing you again after all these years brought everything back." Ariana replied minutes later. "You chose your future back then." Nicholas answered, "Maybe I chose the wrong one." Arden slowly lowered the phone. Because at that moment, the truth became clear. Her husband and her assistant were not strangers. They had known each other long before she hired Ariana. "Before we continue, I want to ask you something. If you were Arden and you saw messages like this on your assistant's phone from your own husband, what would you do? Would you confront them immediately, or would you stay quiet and watch what happens? Tell me your answer in the comments. And if you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel." Arden placed the phone back on the desk, exactly where Ariana had left it. Her hands moved slowly, carefully, as if nothing unusual had happened. Anyone walking into the office at that moment would have seen the same composed executive they always saw. Arden Foster, the calm strategist clients trusted with multi-million-dollar decisions. But inside her mind, something had shifted. Two people she trusted completely had built a secret inside her life. Nicholas, the man she married 5 years ago. The partner she believed shared the same values, the same goals, the same future. And Ariana, the assistant Arden personally hired after believing she would help bring order to the growing demands of the company. Both of them had been part of her daily routine. Both had spoken to her with calm faces. Now Arden understood what stood behind those conversations. She leaned back slightly in her chair and looked out the window. Chicago's skyline stretched across the horizon in evening light. Cars moved slowly along the bridges over the river. Her thoughts did not race. They became clear. Memories from the last few weeks returned one by one. Ariana asking casual questions about Nicholas traveling more often, unexpected schedule changes, small details Arden ignored because trust felt stronger than suspicion. Now each memory settled into place. Footsteps approached in the hallway. Ariana returned a moment later, holding a small package. "Sorry," she said politely. Reception needed a signature. Arden looked up calmly. "No problem." Her voice remained steady. But now she knew the truth Ariana believed was still hidden. The rest of the evening moved quietly. Ariana finished organizing the next day's meetings, while Arden reviewed a few remaining reports. To anyone watching, the office routine looked completely normal. But Arden's mind no longer focused on the documents in front of her. The messages remained clear in her memory. Every word, every plan, every secret. She closed her laptop slowly. "That's enough for today," Arden said calmly. Ariana looked up from the desk across the room. "You're leaving early?" "Yes," Arden replied. "Tomorrow will be busy." Ariana nodded without hesitation. "I'll finalize the morning schedule before I leave." Within minutes, they walked out of the office together. At the elevator, Ariana pressed the lobby button. "Good night, Arden," she said with a polite smile. "Good night," Arden answered. The elevator doors closed. Arden watched Ariana's reflection in the polished metal walls during the short ride down. The same assistant she had trusted. The same woman now connected to the messages she read only minutes earlier. Outside, the Chicago evening air felt cool against her face. Traffic moved steadily through downtown, while lights from nearby towers reflected across the river. Arden drove home in silence. When she entered the penthouse overlooking the skyline, the apartment stood empty. Nicholas had not returned yet. She placed her bag on the kitchen counter and walked toward the large living room windows. The city lights stretched endlessly beyond the glass. Arden sat down and waited, because soon Nicholas would walk through that door, and he had no idea what she now knew. Nearly an hour passed before the elevator doors opened again. Arden heard the sound from the living room. A moment later, the penthouse door unlocked. Nicholas Foster stepped inside, loosening his tie as he walked in. His day had clearly been long. Meetings, negotiations, investors, contracts. His company demanded constant attention. He placed his briefcase on the table near the entrance. "Arden?" he called casually. She remained seated near the window overlooking the Chicago skyline. "Yes," she answered calmly. Nicholas walked farther into the living room and noticed her sitting in the dim light. "You're home early," he said. Arden stood slowly. "I finished work sooner than expected." Nicholas nodded and poured himself a glass of water from the kitchen. Nothing about his movements suggested concern. He had no idea what waited for him in that room. When he turned back toward her, Arden held something in her hand. A phone. Nicholas looked at it for a moment. "That's not yours," he said. "No," Arden replied quietly. "It belongs to Ariana." Nicholas froze. Only for a second, but Arden saw it. She lifted the phone slightly. "I picked it up today while checking a meeting location." Nicholas said nothing. Arden held his eyes. A message appeared on the screen. The room fell silent. "Nicholas," she said calmly. "I read the conversation." His face changed instantly. Arden turned toward the window again. Chicago's lights filled the glass in front of her. Then she spoke one final sentence. "Tomorrow, I decide what happens next." Several years before the quiet confrontation in the penthouse, Arden Foster and Nicholas Foster met in a completely different setting. At that time, neither of them carried the reputation they would later earn. Arden had recently launched Foster Strategic Consulting. Her firm consisted of a small team working from a modest office in Chicago's financial district. She spent most days pitching her services to companies that needed help solving operational and financial challenges. Nicholas, on the other hand, was still building his logistics company. Foster Dominion Holdings had only a handful of shipping routes and a limited number of investors. His ambition was clear, but the company had not yet reached the scale he imagined. Their paths crossed during a business conference in downtown Chicago. The event gathered entrepreneurs, investors, and corporate leaders looking to build new partnerships. Arden attended hoping to meet potential clients. Nicholas arrived looking for investors willing to support the expansion of his shipping network. During a networking session, Nicholas noticed Arden speaking confidently with a group of executives about supply chain efficiency. Her ideas were direct and practical. When the conversation ended, Nicholas approached her. "You explained that problem better than most consultants I've heard," he said. Arden smiled politely. Most companies complicate simple systems. Their conversation continued for nearly an hour. What began as a professional discussion quickly revealed something deeper. Both of them shared a similar mindset: discipline, strategy, long-term thinking. Neither of them chased short victories. They preferred building something lasting. Before the conference ended, Nicholas made a simple suggestion. "Your consulting firm could help my company grow faster." Arden considered the idea. "Then maybe we should schedule a meeting." That meeting became the beginning of a partnership neither of them expected. The meeting Nicholas suggested took place 3 days later. Arden arrived at the office of Foster Dominion Holdings early that morning, carrying several reports she prepared overnight. She had spent hours studying Nicholas's company structure and identifying areas where operations could improve. Nicholas greeted her with clear curiosity. "You analyzed my entire company in less than a week?" Arden placed the documents on the table. "Growth requires structure. Your company has strong potential, but the systems supporting it are still catching up." Nicholas reviewed the reports carefully. What impressed him most was not just the analysis. It was Arden's clarity. She identified problems without hesitation and proposed practical solutions. Over the next several weeks, their professional collaboration intensified. Arden helped restructure logistics schedules, improve internal reporting systems, and organize investor presentations. Nicholas noticed results almost immediately. Contracts became easier to negotiate. Shipping timelines improved. Investors began paying closer attention to his company. During those weeks, their working relationship naturally extended beyond the office. They often continued discussions during dinner after long meetings. Conversations about business gradually expanded into personal topics. Nicholas spoke about his ambition to build a logistics network connecting major ports across continents. Arden spoke about her belief that companies succeeded when leadership valued discipline and accountability. Their values aligned in ways neither of them expected. Respect formed first, then admiration. Eventually, their partnership moved beyond professional collaboration. Nicholas asked Arden to dinner one evening after a successful investor presentation. This time the conversation had nothing to do with business. By the end of that night, both of them understood something important. They worked well together, and they enjoyed each other's company just as much. The following years brought rapid progress for both of them. Arden's consulting firm expanded as more companies sought her expertise. Clients appreciated her ability to analyze complex problems and provide solutions that delivered measurable results. Meanwhile, Foster Dominion Holdings began securing major shipping contracts across North America. Nicholas proved himself to be a confident negotiator. He understood risk and knew when to push forward with bold decisions. Although their companies remained separate businesses, Arden and Nicholas supported each other's growth constantly. When Nicholas prepared presentations for investors, Arden reviewed the financial projections. When Arden pursued new corporate clients, Nicholas introduced her to executives within his professional network. Their collaboration created momentum. Soon both companies outgrew their early offices. Arden moved Foster Strategic Consulting into a modern building overlooking the Chicago River. Nicholas expanded his company headquarters into a larger space capable of managing international shipping operations. Their professional success strengthened their personal relationship. Evenings often ended with the two of them discussing plans for the future while looking across the city skyline. Chicago had become more than a place where they worked. It was the city where they were building their ambitions together. When Nicholas eventually proposed marriage, Arden accepted without hesitation. The ceremony remained elegant but simple. Close friends, family members, and a few business partners attended. To everyone present, the union felt natural. Two driven individuals choosing to build a life together while continuing to grow their careers. At that moment, nothing suggested their partnership would ever face the kind of test waiting years ahead. As their companies expanded, public attention began following their success. Business magazines frequently wrote about Nicholas Foster's rapid rise within the logistics industry. His company secured new shipping contracts connecting ports across multiple continents. Arden's consulting firm also gained recognition. Major corporations praised her strategic insight and her ability to improve operational efficiency within complex organizations. Journalists soon noticed something unique. Two highly successful leaders living in the same city, married, supporting each other's ambitions. Profiles began appearing in financial publications. Articles described them as one of Chicago's most admired business partnerships. Photographs showed them attending charity events together. Nicholas often spoke about innovation within global logistics, while Arden discussed leadership and responsible corporate management. At one conference, a reporter asked Arden how she balanced marriage and professional responsibility. Her answer remained simple. Success becomes easier when two people respect each other's goals. Nicholas often echoed similar sentiments. He praised Arden's discipline and strategic thinking whenever asked about her role in his life. The public image surrounding them continued growing. To many observers, they represented a rare example of balance, ambition without rivalry, partnership without conflict. Their names began appearing together frequently in headlines about Chicago's rising business leaders. Friends and colleagues often admired their relationship. They seemed united by shared values and mutual respect. From the outside, their marriage appeared stable, strong, and deeply supportive. Few people could imagine anything capable of breaking the trust between them. For Arden, the foundation of their relationship rested on one principle: loyalty. She believed their marriage succeeded because both of them valued honesty and discipline. Those values had guided their professional lives, and she believed they guided their personal relationship as well. Even during the busiest periods of their careers, Arden and Nicholas tried to protect time for each other. One evening every week remained reserved for dinner together. Sometimes they visited restaurants across Chicago. Other nights they stayed in the penthouse overlooking the skyline and talked about their work, their plans, and their future. Those conversations reinforced Arden's confidence in their partnership. Nicholas rarely shared personal struggles with anyone else, yet he often discussed business decisions openly with her. Arden respected that trust. She believed their relationship succeeded because they treated each other as equals. Two leaders, two partners, two people building something meaningful together. Over time, however, Nicholas's responsibilities continued expanding. Foster Dominion Holdings began securing international contracts requiring frequent travel. Meetings in New York, London, and Singapore became increasingly common. At first, Arden supported those trips without hesitation. Global expansion was part of Nicholas's long-term strategy. But as the months passed, the travel schedule grew heavier. Nicholas began leaving Chicago more often, sometimes for several days, sometimes for an entire week. Arden reassured herself that success required sacrifice. Still, a quiet change had begun forming inside their routine. Nicholas was spending more time away from home, and neither of them yet realized how important those absences would soon become. As Arden's consulting firm continued expanding, the demands on her time increased beyond what she could manage alone. Foster Strategic Consulting had grown from a small advisory team into a respected firm working with large corporations across several states. Each week brought new client meetings, strategic presentations, travel arrangements, and negotiations. Arden remained disciplined about every detail. Yet even discipline had limits. Her operations director, Marcus Hale, noticed the pressure building first. One afternoon he stepped into her office holding a folder filled with new client proposals. "You're handling too much personally," he said. Arden looked up from the reports on her desk. "I prefer staying close to the decisions." Marcus nodded. "That works when the company is small, but we're not small anymore." He placed the folder down. "You need someone managing your calendar, travel, and meeting coordination." Arden leaned back slightly, considering the suggestion. For years she had operated with minimal assistance. She trusted her own organization and rarely relied on others for scheduling. But the reality was becoming difficult to ignore. Her calendar had become crowded with overlapping meetings. Important calls occasionally arrived during other commitments. Travel logistics required constant adjustment. If the company planned to continue growing, Arden needed support. Within days, Marcus arranged interviews for several candidates applying for the position of personal assistant. The role required more than administrative skill. Arden needed someone capable of managing sensitive business information, organizing high-level meetings, and protecting her schedule from unnecessary interruptions. Trust would matter just as much as efficiency. Over the next week, multiple candidates visited the office. Some carried impressive resumes. Others spoke confidently about previous experience assisting executives. But Arden remained patient. She believed the right person would stand out clearly. And when Ariana Cross entered the office for her interview, Arden immediately sensed something different. Ariana Cross entered the conference room with calm confidence. Her appearance reflected professional simplicity, dark blazer, neatly organized portfolio, and a focused expression that suggested careful preparation. Arden noticed the details immediately. Many candidates tried to impress with long explanations about past positions. Ariana approached the conversation differently. She listened first, then answered questions with precise clarity. Marcus began the interview by reviewing the responsibilities. You would manage Arden's schedule, coordinate travel, and prepare materials for high-level meetings. Ariana nodded. I've handled similar roles for senior executives in New York. Arden leaned forward slightly. What was the most difficult part of supporting leadership at that level? She asked. Ariana responded without hesitation. Protecting their time. The answer caught Arden's attention. Explain. Leaders often receive more requests than they should accept, Ariana said. My job is to filter what truly deserves their attention. Marcus exchanged a quick glance with Arden. That perspective showed an understanding many assistants never developed. Arden asked another question. How do you handle confidential information? Ariana's response remained calm. Discretion is not optional in executive environments. If someone cannot trust their assistant completely, the position fails. The conversation continued for nearly 40 minutes. Ariana described past experiences organizing investor meetings, coordinating travel across multiple cities, and preparing briefing documents for corporate presentations. Her answers never sounded exaggerated. Each example felt practical and realistic. When the interview ended, Marcus waited until Ariana left the room before speaking. Well, he said quietly. That was impressive. Arden nodded. For the first time since beginning the search, she felt confident she had found someone capable of handling the role. After the interview ended, Arden reviewed Ariana's resume once more. Several years of experience assisting senior executives, work in high-pressure corporate environments, strong references from previous employers. Everything aligned with what Arden needed. Marcus waited across the table while she finished reading. We still have 2 more candidates scheduled tomorrow, he reminded her. Arden closed the folder. I don't think we need them. Marcus raised an eyebrow. That confident? Yes. Arden stood and walked toward the window overlooking the Chicago River. A personal assistant would gain access to many aspects of her daily life. Business plans, private communications, travel details, and sensitive negotiations. Choosing the wrong person could create unnecessary risk. But Ariana's professionalism had been clear. She demonstrated organization, discretion, and the calm presence Arden preferred in her team. Arden turned back toward Marcus. Call her, she said. Within minutes, Marcus arranged a second brief meeting. Ariana returned to the office later that afternoon. Arden greeted her in the conference room with a direct tone. We would like you to join Foster Strategic Consulting. Ariana's expression remained composed, though relief appeared briefly in her eyes. Thank you, she replied. You can begin Monday morning. Ariana nodded with appreciation. I won't disappoint you. Arden believed her. The decision felt practical, logical. The company needed structured support, and Ariana appeared ready to deliver exactly that. As the meeting ended, Ariana collected her portfolio and prepared to leave. Neither woman realized how deeply their lives were about to intertwine, because the name Ariana Cross had not yet crossed Nicholas Foster's path again. But fate had already begun placing the pieces together. Ariana began working at Foster Strategic Consulting the following Monday. Within days, her impact became noticeable across the office. She organized Arden's calendar with precise efficiency. Meetings that once overlapped were now carefully structured to allow proper preparation time. Travel arrangements became smoother. Documents for presentations appeared neatly prepared before Arden even requested them. Marcus quickly noticed the improvement. One afternoon he stopped by Arden's office while Ariana reviewed travel schedules nearby. "I think we underestimated how helpful this role would be," he said quietly. Arden glanced toward Ariana. She understands the pace of executive work. Ariana rarely spoke unnecessarily during office hours. Instead, she focused on organizing reports, confirming meeting times, and ensuring that every appointment followed a clear structure. Clients appreciated the professionalism. Executives arriving for consultations found schedules running smoothly. Even unexpected changes were handled calmly. If a meeting needed adjustment, Ariana arranged alternatives without disrupting the entire day. After several weeks, Arden began relying on her more frequently. Travel coordination, presentation materials, investor meeting schedules, and conference invitations all passed through Ariana's careful review. Late evenings sometimes required both women to remain in the office preparing reports. During those quiet hours, Ariana occasionally asked small questions about Arden's work. "How did you build the consulting firm so quickly?" she asked one night. Arden smiled slightly. "Consistency." Ariana nodded thoughtfully. "And your husband?" "Nicholas Foster runs Foster Dominion Holdings, correct?" "Yes," Arden replied casually. "He's expanding internationally." Ariana simply returned to her work. Her expression remained calm, but inside, that name had already stirred memories she thought belonged to the past. Weeks passed, and Ariana's presence became a normal part of Arden's daily routine. The more Arden observed her work, the more confident she became in the decision to hire her. Ariana anticipated problems before they appeared. She confirmed travel details days in advance. She reviewed meeting materials carefully to ensure nothing important was overlooked. That level of preparation allowed Arden to focus on strategic decisions instead of administrative details. One evening, they remained at the office preparing for a major investor presentation scheduled the following week. The building had grown quiet, as most employees had already gone home. Ariana reviewed Arden's upcoming calendar. "You have dinner scheduled Thursday evening," she said while typing notes into the system. Arden looked up from her laptop. "Yes, with Nicholas." Ariana paused briefly before continuing. "That's good. Your schedule has been very full lately." Arden nodded. "We try to keep one evening each week for ourselves." Ariana entered the information carefully into the system. Her posture remained calm, her voice steady, but inside her mind, the name Nicholas Foster carried a meaning Arden could not yet see. Because Ariana had known Nicholas long before this job existed, long before Arden entered his life. Years earlier, their paths had crossed during Nicholas's early business expansion in New York. Ariana pushed that memory aside and continued working. Professional focus returned to the task in front of her. Then, as she updated Arden's schedule for the following week, something appeared on the screen. A new calendar entry. Nicholas Foster. For a moment, Ariana's fingers stopped above the keyboard. The past had just stepped directly into her present, and neither Arden nor Nicholas knew how close those two worlds were about to collide. Several years before Ariana Cross ever stepped into Arden Foster's office in Chicago, her life looked very different. At the time, Ariana lived in New York City. Her apartment stood in a busy neighborhood not far from Midtown, where tall office towers filled the streets with constant movement. Financial firms, consulting companies, and investment groups operated from nearly every building in the district. Ariana worked as an executive assistant for a venture capital firm that specialized in funding young companies with strong growth potential. Her role demanded discipline and attention to detail. Every week, she coordinated meetings between investors and entrepreneurs hoping to secure funding. She managed schedules, prepared briefing materials, and ensured executives had everything required for important discussions. The position placed her near the center of many business negotiations. She listened carefully during investor presentations and gradually developed an understanding of how successful companies grew from small ideas into major operations. One autumn week, the firm hosted a large finance conference attended by entrepreneurs from across the country. Dozens of startup founders arrived hoping to present their companies to potential investors. Ariana spent days preparing the conference schedule. Meeting rooms had to be organized, presentations coordinated, and investors guided through a full list of company introductions. On the second day of the event, One particular presentation caught her attention. The speaker was a young logistics entrepreneur from Chicago, Nicholas Foster. He stood at the front of the conference room, explaining his vision for a shipping network connecting major ports across North America. His presentation focused on efficiency, expansion, and long-term strategy. Ariana noticed something immediately. Unlike many founders who exaggerated their projections, Nicholas spoke with careful confidence. He believed in the future of his company, and that quiet certainty would soon lead to a conversation neither of them expected. After Nicholas finished presenting his business plan, several investors gathered around him with questions. Ariana stood near the back of the room organizing documents for the next session, but she continued listening to the conversation. Nicholas answered every question clearly. He explained shipping routes, expansion timelines, and the technology systems his company planned to develop in order to improve delivery speed between major ports. Most startup founders sounded nervous during investor discussions. Nicholas remained steady. Once the meeting ended and the investors moved to another presentation, Ariana approached him to collect the presentation materials. "You explained your logistics model well," she said. Nicholas looked at her with mild surprise. "Most people only hear the financial numbers." Ariana smiled slightly. "Numbers matter. But structure matters more." Nicholas noticed the way she spoke. Her comment reflected the kind of practical thinking many executives valued. "What firm do you work for?" he asked. She told him the name of the venture capital group hosting the conference. Nicholas nodded. "That explains why you noticed the operational details." Their conversation lasted only a few minutes, but it continued later that evening during a networking reception held in the same building. Ariana found herself standing beside Nicholas again, while guests discussed business opportunities across the room. This time the conversation moved beyond presentations and investors. Nicholas spoke about his goal of building a logistics company capable of competing with the largest shipping networks in the world. Ariana listened carefully. Ambition did not intimidate her. She admired people who pursued long-term goals with discipline. By the end of the evening, Nicholas asked a simple question. "Would you like to continue this conversation tomorrow?" Ariana agreed. Neither of them realized how important that decision would soon become. After the conference ended, Nicholas remained in New York for several days meeting with investors. During that time, he and Ariana met for coffee near her office one morning. What began as a casual conversation soon turned into something more personal. Nicholas spoke openly about the early challenges of building his logistics company. Competition remained strong, and large corporations already dominated many shipping routes. But he believed his approach to operational efficiency would allow his company to grow steadily. Ariana admired his determination. Her work inside the venture capital firm had introduced her to many entrepreneurs. Yet few demonstrated the same balance of ambition and patience. Nicholas noticed Ariana's insight during their conversations. She asked thoughtful questions about supply chains, investor expectations, and corporate growth strategies. Unlike most people he met during conferences, Ariana did not simply praise his ideas. She analyzed them. Their discussions soon became regular. Whenever Nicholas traveled to New York for investor meetings, they arranged time to see each other. Sometimes they met for dinner. Other evenings they walked through the busy streets near Midtown while discussing business plans and future goals. Over time, the connection between them deepened. The relationship remained quiet. Neither of them felt the need to announce it publicly. Nicholas focused on expanding his company. Ariana continued supporting executives within the venture capital firm. Yet whenever Nicholas visited the city, their time together carried the same sense of familiarity. Both of them understood the connection growing between them. What began as professional curiosity slowly developed into a personal relationship. For nearly a year, their lives remained linked by those quiet meetings. But as Nicholas's company began attracting larger investors, the direction of his life started changing in ways neither of them fully anticipated. As Foster Dominion Holdings began gaining attention from major investors, Nicholas's responsibilities expanded rapidly. Large shipping contracts required constant travel. Meetings with corporate partners filled his schedule across multiple cities. The more his company grew, the more pressure surrounded every decision he made. One evening during another trip to New York, Nicholas asked Ariana to meet him at a quiet restaurant near the financial district. Ariana sensed the seriousness of the conversation before he even spoke. Nicholas remained thoughtful during dinner. Finally, he placed his glass on the table and looked at her carefully. "My life is becoming more complicated," he said. Ariana listened without interrupting. "Investors expect stability," Nicholas continued. "Public attention around the company is growing. Every decision I make will be examined closely." She understood what he was trying to explain. Nicholas valued the connection they had built together, but his ambitions now required a different path. "The company must come first," he said. Ariana nodded slowly. She had always respected ambition, and she knew the world Nicholas was entering demanded careful choices. Their relationship ended that evening without anger. No argument, no accusations, only a quiet understanding that their lives were moving in separate directions. Nicholas returned to Chicago. Ariana continued her career in New York. Years passed. They never contacted each other again. At least not until one unexpected moment changed everything. Late one afternoon in Chicago, while Ariana organized Arden Foster's calendar inside the consulting office, a notification appeared on her phone. The sender's name stopped her completely. "Nicholas." The message read, "I heard you're working for Arden now." A second message appeared seconds later. "We should talk." And just like that, a connection she believed belonged to the past had returned to her present. The message arrived late in the afternoon, while Ariana reviewed Arden Foster's calendar. Her phone rested beside the keyboard as she organized travel details for the upcoming week. Meetings with investors, client presentations, and corporate consultations filled nearly every day. The device vibrated softly. Ariana glanced down. The sender's name appeared clearly on the screen. Nicholas Foster. For a moment, her hands stopped moving. Years had passed since they last spoke. Their final conversation in New York had ended quietly, both understanding that their lives were moving in separate directions. Now his name appeared again without warning. She opened the message. "I heard you're working for Arden now." Ariana stared at the screen. The words felt simple, yet they carried a weight she had not expected to feel again. Seconds later, another message appeared. "We should talk." Ariana hesitated before replying. "What is there to talk about?" Nicholas responded almost immediately. "A lot has changed." Ariana leaned back slightly in her chair. Across the office, Arden remained focused on a financial report, unaware of the conversation unfolding only a few feet away. Ariana typed carefully, "I work for your wife now. That makes things complicated." Nicholas answered again, "I know. That's why we should talk." The conversation paused there. Ariana set the phone down and returned her attention to the computer screen. But her thoughts had already shifted. The past she believed had ended years ago was suddenly present again. Later that evening, after leaving the office and returning to her apartment, Ariana checked her phone once more. Another message waited. "I never expected to see your name again." She read the words twice, then slowly began typing a reply. After that first exchange, the messages did not stop. At first, the conversations remained brief. Nicholas asked simple questions. "How long have you been in Chicago?" Ariana answered cautiously. "A few months." "Working directly with Arden?" "Yes." The tone stayed polite, almost distant. But the more they spoke, the easier it became to continue the conversation. A few days later, Nicholas sent another message late in the evening. "Do you ever think about those years in New York?" Ariana read the text while sitting in her apartment living room. The question carried more meaning than the earlier messages. She replied after several minutes. "Sometimes." Nicholas answered quickly. "I do too." That night their conversation lasted longer than any previous exchange. They spoke about their careers, the changes that had occurred since they last met, and the companies they now worked for in Chicago. Neither of them mentioned Arden directly, but the unspoken reality remained clear. Nicholas was now married, and Ariana worked closely with his wife every day. Despite that knowledge, the late-night conversations continued during the following weeks. Often they began after midnight, when the city grew quiet. Nicholas sometimes shared stories about business travel. Ariana spoke about the challenges of supporting a rapidly expanding consulting firm. Each message reopened a familiarity that once existed between them. The same connection they shared years earlier slowly returned. Ariana knew the situation carried risks. Yet every time her phone lit up with Nicholas's name, she found herself replying. The conversations had begun quietly, but something deeper was already forming beneath those late-night messages. For Nicholas, the renewed conversations with Ariana felt like revisiting a chapter of his life he once valued deeply. His marriage to Arden had brought stability and professional partnership. Together, they had built successful careers and earned admiration across Chicago's business community. Yet their lives had grown increasingly busy. Travel schedules, corporate responsibilities, and constant meetings often left little time for quiet personal moments. When Ariana reappeared in his life, the familiarity surprised him. Their conversations felt natural, comfortable. Nicholas told himself there was nothing wrong with exchanging occasional messages. After all, Ariana now lived in the same city. They shared history. Speaking with her simply reminded him of earlier years before his company grew into a global operation. That was the explanation he repeated in his mind. Just conversation, nothing more. Still, he found himself checking his phone more often during the day. If Ariana sent a message, he answered quickly. If several hours passed without a reply, he wondered whether she was busy with Arden's schedule. Sometimes he caught himself smiling at the screen while reading her responses. Nicholas never described those moments as emotional attachment. Instead, he convinced himself they represented harmless communication between two people who once knew each other well. But late at night, when the messages stretched longer and the conversations drifted into memories of their time together in New York, he began realizing something important. The connection between them had never fully disappeared, and the more they spoke, the harder it became to pretend those feelings belonged only to the past. The first time Nicholas suggested meeting in person again, Ariana did not respond immediately. The message appeared during an afternoon meeting at Arden's office. "I'll be in New York next week for investor meetings," Nicholas wrote. "Would you like to talk face to face?" Ariana read the message twice. Meeting him again meant crossing a line she had carefully avoided since joining Arden's company. Yet curiosity remained strong. Days passed before she answered. "Just coffee," she finally replied. Nicholas agreed. The meeting took place in a quiet cafe, not far from the financial district. When Nicholas walked in, Ariana immediately noticed how much had changed since the last time they saw each other. He carried the confidence of a successful executive now, yet his expression softened when he saw her. Their conversation began cautiously. They spoke about work, about Chicago, about the changes in their lives during the years apart. But as the minutes passed, the old familiarity returned quickly. The ease of their earlier connection resurfaced. Neither of them mentioned Arden. Neither addressed the complicated reality of Ariana working directly for Nicholas's wife. By the end of the meeting, they agreed to stay in contact. That single conversation quietly reopened the relationship they once shared. Soon Nicholas began arranging his business travel schedules in ways that occasionally placed him in the same city as Ariana. Each meeting remained discreet, private, carefully separated from their public lives. But the more frequently those meetings occurred, the harder it became to deny what they had become. Despite the renewed connection with Nicholas, Ariana could not ignore the reality of her position. Every morning she walked into Arden Foster's office. She organized Arden's meetings, prepared presentations, protected her schedule from unnecessary interruptions. Over time, Arden had begun trusting her completely. That trust weighed heavily on Ariana's thoughts. Some evenings she returned home and stared at her phone for long minutes before responding to Nicholas's messages. Part of her knew the situation was wrong. Arden treated her with professional respect and kindness. Their working relationship had grown strong, yet the emotional pull from the past remained difficult to ignore. Nicholas represented a chapter of Ariana's life that never truly closed. Their conversations reminded her of the ambition and connection they once shared. The conflict between loyalty and emotion grew stronger each week. One evening, while organizing Arden's upcoming calendar, Ariana noticed a new dinner appointment scheduled for Thursday night. Arden had entered the event personally. Dinner with Nicholas. Ariana paused briefly before continuing to type. A moment later, Arden looked up from her laptop. "We're hosting a small dinner that evening," she said casually. "A few close colleagues." Ariana nodded. "I'll make sure the schedule stays clear." Arden smiled. "You should come too. It would be good for you to meet Nicholas properly." Ariana's fingers froze above the keyboard. Because Arden had no idea the introduction she was planning had already happened years earlier. Viewer engagement. Before the story continues, think about this for a moment. If you were in Ariana's position, working closely with Arden while secretly reconnecting with her husband. Should Ariana have told Arden the truth? Or should she have walked away from Nicholas completely? Share your thoughts in the comments. Because on Thursday night, Arden was about to schedule a dinner where all three of them would sit at the same table, and only one of them understood the secret connection already standing between them. Thursday evening arrived with the quiet elegance Arden preferred for private dinners. The penthouse overlooking downtown Chicago had been prepared carefully. Soft lighting filled the dining area, while the city skyline stretched beyond the tall glass windows. A long table near the living room held a small arrangement of white flowers and neatly placed dinner settings. Arden believed evenings like this helped maintain balance between her demanding professional life and her marriage. Nicholas arrived home earlier than usual that night. He walked into the penthouse, removing his jacket while glancing toward the dining table. "Are we expecting guests?" he asked. Arden nodded with a small smile. "Just one. I want you to finally meet my assistant properly." Nicholas poured himself a glass of water. "Ariana, right?" "Yes," Arden replied. "She's been managing my schedule for months now. I realized you've never actually had dinner together." Nicholas paused for only a brief moment before responding. "That sounds fine." A short time later, the doorbell rang. Arden walked to the entrance and opened the door. Ariana Cross stood there holding a small gift box wrapped neatly in silver paper. "Thank you for inviting me," Ariana said politely. Arden welcomed her inside. "Come in. Nicholas is already here." They walked into the living room together. Nicholas turned from the window just as Ariana entered the room. For a fraction of a second, their eyes met. Years of shared memories passed silently between them. But Arden saw none of it. She stepped forward with warm confidence. "Nicholas," she said, "this is Ariana Cross, the assistant I told you about." Nicholas extended his hand calmly. "Nice to finally meet you." Nicholas's expression remained controlled as he shook Ariana's hand. "Arden speaks highly of your work," he said politely. Ariana returned the handshake with the same professional composure. "Thank you." To Arden, the moment appeared completely normal. Two professionals meeting for the first time. But beneath the surface, both Nicholas and Ariana felt the tension immediately. Neither of them expected this situation to happen so quickly. Their earlier meetings during business travel had always remained private, carefully separated from the rest of their lives. Now they stood face to face inside Nicholas and Arden's home, and Arden remained unaware of the history between them. Nicholas released Ariana's hand and gestured toward the dining area. "Please, have a seat." Arden watched the interaction with quiet satisfaction. "I told you she's incredibly organized," she said while pouring drinks. "The company runs far smoother now." Nicholas nodded. "That's valuable in a growing firm." Throughout the conversation, he carefully controlled his tone and posture. Years of corporate negotiations had trained him to remain calm under pressure. Still, he could feel the weight of the situation. Across the table sat the woman he once shared a relationship with, and beside him sat the woman he married. The two worlds he kept separate had suddenly collided. Nicholas focused on maintaining normal conversation. He asked Ariana polite questions about her work at the consulting firm. He complimented the structure she had brought to Arden's schedule. To Arden, the evening appeared relaxed. But Nicholas understood something clearly. Every word he spoke required careful control. Because one mistake could expose the truth neither of them was ready to reveal. Ariana maintained the same calm professionalism she always showed inside Arden's office. Her posture remained relaxed, her voice steady. Anyone observing the dinner would assume she was simply an assistant meeting her employer's husband for the first time. Yet inside her thoughts, the situation felt far more complicated. Across the table sat Nicholas Foster, the same man she once met during a finance conference in New York, the same man she shared months of quiet connection with years earlier. Now he was Arden's husband, and Arden sat beside him speaking warmly about their life together. "You should see the way Ariana organizes investor presentations," Arden said during dinner. "She notices details most people overlook." Ariana smiled politely. "I try to stay ahead of the schedule." Nicholas nodded. That skill makes a difference in executive environments. Their conversation remained formal, professional, but occasionally their eyes met across the table. Those brief moments carried unspoken recognition. Arden never noticed. She continued describing the consulting firm's recent expansion and the clients her company had begun working with across multiple states. Ariana listened carefully and responded whenever Arden asked her opinion. The evening moved forward without any visible tension. Still, Ariana felt the quiet pressure of the secret she shared with Nicholas. Every sentence required careful attention. Every reaction needed control, because one careless expression could reveal a connection Arden did not yet know existed. By the time dessert arrived, Ariana realized something important. This dinner had placed her directly between loyalty to Arden and unresolved emotions connected to Nicholas, and that balance was becoming harder to maintain. As the evening continued, the conversation gradually shifted toward business travel. Nicholas mentioned an upcoming investor meeting scheduled in New York. Expansion into international routes requires careful negotiation, he explained. Arden nodded. You've been traveling more often lately. Nicholas glanced briefly toward Ariana before answering. Growth demands it. The moment lasted only a second, but Ariana noticed the meaning behind the words. Their earlier meeting in New York had occurred during one of those same business trips. Arden continued speaking without sensing the connection. I don't know how you manage so many cities at once, she said. Nicholas smiled slightly. Planning helps. Ariana lowered her gaze toward her plate. To anyone watching, the movement appeared ordinary, but both she and Nicholas understood the quiet signals hidden within the conversation. Occasionally, Arden stepped into the kitchen to check on the meal. During those brief moments of privacy, the atmosphere around the table changed. Nicholas and Ariana avoided direct conversation, yet their shared awareness filled the silence between them. When Arden returned to the room, the polite dinner conversation resumed immediately. By the end of the evening, Ariana prepared to leave. Arden walked her to the door. I'm glad you came, Arden said warmly. Ariana smiled. Thank you for inviting me. Nicholas remained in the living room while they spoke. Moments later, the elevator doors closed behind Ariana as she left the building. The penthouse returned to quiet. But the night was not finished. Later that evening, as Ariana arrived home and placed her phone on the kitchen counter, the screen lit up with a new message. Nicholas, we need to talk about tonight. And the secret they shared had just grown even more complicated. In the weeks following the dinner at the penthouse, Arden began sensing a subtle change in Nicholas. At first, the difference appeared small. Nicholas still returned home after long workdays. He still discussed business developments over dinner and shared updates about Foster Dominion Holdings expanding into new shipping routes. Yet something about his attention had shifted. There were moments when he seemed present in the room, but mentally somewhere else. One evening, Arden prepared dinner, while Nicholas sat at the kitchen counter reviewing messages on his phone. Normally, he would ask about her day or discuss upcoming client meetings. That night, he remained unusually quiet. Busy week? Arden asked, while placing plates on the table. Nicholas glanced up briefly. Yes. Several negotiations happening at once. His answer sounded normal, but his focus returned quickly to the phone screen in his hand. Later that evening, as they sat together in the living room, Arden noticed the device light up again. Nicholas read the message quickly and typed a reply before locking the screen. She did not ask who had contacted him. Nicholas's work involved constant communication with executives, investors, and logistics partners across multiple countries. Still, the pattern continued during the following days. He checked his phone more often. He stepped into other rooms to answer certain calls. Sometimes he appeared distracted even during their usual weekly dinner evenings. Arden told herself it was simply the pressure of expanding a global company. Success often required intense focus, yet a quiet feeling began forming in the back of her mind. Not suspicion exactly, more like a small question she had not yet chosen to examine closely. Around the same time, Ariana began asking Arden questions that felt slightly unusual. The first moment happened during a late evening at the office while they prepared materials for an investor presentation. Ariana reviewed the upcoming schedule displayed on her computer screen. You and Nicholas have dinner planned Friday, she said. Arden nodded while organizing documents. Yes. We try to keep that routine when possible. Ariana hesitated briefly before asking another question. Does Nicholas travel often for work? Arden looked up. More lately. The company is expanding internationally. Ariana nodded thoughtfully and returned her attention to the calendar. The conversation seemed harmless. Still, similar questions appeared during the following weeks. One afternoon, while coordinating travel arrangements, Ariana asked casually, "How long are Nicholas's trips usually?" 2 or 3 days, Arden replied. Sometimes longer, depending on negotiations. Another evening, Ariana mentioned, "He must meet many investors during those trips." Arden smiled slightly. That's part of building a global company. Each question sounded reasonable on its own. Yet the frequency slowly caught Arden's attention. Ariana had always maintained professional boundaries during conversations. Now she seemed curious about Nicholas's schedule more often. Arden dismissed the thought quickly. It made sense for her assistant to understand the commitments affecting her calendar. After all, coordinating schedules between two busy executives often required careful planning. Even so, the pattern remained in Arden's memory. Small questions appearing at unexpected moments, none of them alarming, but together, they created a faint sense of curiosity Arden had not felt before. As Nicholas's travel schedule increased, Arden occasionally noticed minor inconsistencies in his plans. They were never serious enough to cause concern. Still, they appeared often enough to draw her attention. One evening, Nicholas mentioned he would travel to New York for 2 days of meetings with international investors. Arden nodded. "That city seems to be calling you frequently lately." Nicholas smiled. "Many shipping companies operate through that port. It's important territory." The explanation sounded reasonable. Yet later that week, while reviewing business news online, Arden noticed a report about a logistics conference taking place in Boston. The article mentioned several major companies attending, including Foster Dominion Holdings. When Nicholas returned home 2 days later, Arden asked casually, "How was New York?" Nicholas removed his jacket and nodded. "Productive meetings." Arden studied him briefly. She almost mentioned the Boston conference but decided against it. Perhaps the meetings had included both cities. Travel schedules often changed at the last minute. Another time, Nicholas explained he would spend 3 days in Chicago meeting investors visiting from overseas. But during one of those evenings, he returned home much later than expected. "Dinner ran longer than planned," he said while placing his keys on the counter. Arden accepted the explanation. Business negotiations sometimes stretched into late hours. Still, the small differences between his explanations and occasional details she noticed elsewhere continued quietly accumulating in her thoughts. Each one felt too minor to challenge directly, but together, they created a growing sense that something in Nicholas's routine had shifted. Despite those small observations, Arden chose not to question Nicholas directly. Trust had always been the foundation of their relationship. They built their marriage on mutual respect, shared ambition, and loyalty. Arden believed those values still guided their life together. Whenever the quiet doubts appeared, she reminded herself of the years they had spent building their careers side by side. Nicholas had supported her consulting firm from the beginning. She had helped him refine strategies during the early growth of Foster Dominion Holdings. Their partnership had always been strong. One evening, Arden sat alone in her office reviewing documents for the following week. Ariana had stepped out briefly to collect a delivery from reception. The office floor remained quiet. Most employees had already gone home. Arden glanced at the calendar displayed on Ariana's computer screen. Nicholas's upcoming travel plans appeared alongside Arden's consulting appointments. Everything looked normal. Arden leaned back in her chair. Perhaps she had simply allowed stress from work to create unnecessary concerns. Companies expanding at the pace of Nicholas's business required constant attention. Late calls and travel adjustments were normal. The same pressures existed within her own firm. Arden reached for Ariana's phone resting on the desk. She only wanted to confirm the address of a meeting scheduled for Tuesday morning. As the screen lit up in her hand, a new message appeared at the top. The sender's name froze her completely. Nicholas, and the words beneath his name made her heart stop for a moment. "I miss you already." Arden stared at the phone in her hand as the message remained on the screen. "I miss you already." For a brief moment she wondered if she had misunderstood what she was seeing. Perhaps Nicholas had sent the message to the wrong contact. Perhaps the message belonged to a conversation unrelated to what it appeared to be. But before she could set the phone down, another notification appeared. "Nicholas. Last night shouldn't have ended so quickly." Arden's fingers remained still around the device. The office felt unusually quiet. Most of the employees had already gone home, leaving only the faint hum of the building's air system echoing through the hallway. Her thumb moved slowly across the screen. She opened the message thread. A series of conversations filled the display. Not a single message. Many. Arden began reading. Nicholas, did she notice anything today? Ariana, no. She trusts me. Arden felt her chest tighten. The words remained simple, direct, and painfully clear. She scrolled further. Nicholas, I hate pretending during meetings. Ariana, we agreed to be careful. Arden paused. The office window reflected her faint image against the dark skyline outside. Chicago's evening light stretched across the river behind her. She kept reading. Nicholas, seeing you again after all these years brought everything back. Ariana, you made your choice before. Nicholas, maybe I chose wrong. Arden slowly lowered the phone. At that moment, there was no longer any doubt about what the messages meant. The man she married and the woman she trusted inside her company shared a connection she never expected. For several seconds, Arden remained completely still. The phone rested in her hand, as her mind carefully processed the information she had just read. Shock did not arrive in the dramatic way many people imagined. Instead, a quiet understanding settled slowly across her thoughts. Nicholas and Ariana had not simply exchanged one careless message. Their conversation revealed planning, secrecy, a relationship continuing behind her back. Arden leaned back in her chair and looked toward the window. The Chicago skyline remained unchanged outside. Cars moved along the bridges across the river. Office towers glowed with evening lights. Life continued normally across the city. Yet inside that quiet office, Arden's understanding of her marriage had just shifted. Memories from recent weeks returned one by one. Nicholas becoming distracted during conversations. His frequent phone messages. The sudden increase in business travel. Ariana's questions about Nicholas during late work evenings. Each detail that once felt insignificant now formed a clear pattern. Arden replayed the dinner evening in her mind. The polite handshake between Nicholas and Ariana, their careful conversation across the table, the brief moments when their eyes met. At the time, she noticed nothing unusual. Now those moments carried a different meaning. The realization did not explode into anger. It arrived with calm clarity. Two people she trusted had quietly built a relationship behind her back, and both of them believed she would never find out. Arden placed the phone back on the desk exactly where Ariana had left it. Her movements remained steady. Years of managing corporate negotiations had taught her one important lesson. Emotion rarely helped in moments that required clear thinking. Across the office, Ariana's chair remained empty. She would return soon from reception. Arden knew she had only a few minutes before the normal routine resumed. Instead of reacting immediately, Arden reopened the document she had been reviewing earlier. Financial projections for an upcoming client meeting filled the computer screen. Her eyes moved across the numbers while her mind continued processing the truth she had discovered. Footsteps approached in the hallway. A moment later, Ariana entered the office carrying a small delivery package. Sorry for the delay, she said politely. Reception needed a signature. Arden looked up calmly. No problem. Her voice sounded steady, composed. Nothing in her expression revealed what she now knew. Ariana returned to her desk and resumed organizing the next day's schedule. The same professional routine continued inside the room. Yet the atmosphere had changed completely. Arden now understood something Ariana believed remained hidden, and she chose not to reveal that knowledge yet. Instead, she continued reviewing her documents while quietly observing the assistant across the room. Ariana worked normally, typing notes, reviewing appointments, answering emails. Not once did she look toward Arden with any sign of concern, because Ariana had no idea the secret conversation on her phone had already been seen. When Ariana eventually left the office later that evening, Arden remained seated at her desk for several minutes. The building had grown almost completely silent. She closed her laptop slowly. Her thoughts no longer revolved around shock. They had shifted toward decision. Arden understood two things clearly. First, Nicholas and Ariana believed their secret remained safe. Second, acting too quickly could prevent her from understanding the full truth behind their relationship. She preferred clarity before confrontation. Arden stood and walked toward the window, overlooking the river. The city lights reflected across the dark water, For years, she and Nicholas had built their careers together in this city. They had earned respect, success, and influence. Yet all of that suddenly felt fragile. Arden reached for her coat and turned off the office lights. The elevator carried her down to the quiet street below. Cool night air moved through downtown Chicago as she stepped outside. Her car waited along the curb. The drive home passed in silence. Traffic lights reflected across the windshield, while her thoughts remained focused on the conversation she would soon have, because the man she married still believed everything remained normal. Viewer engagement. At this moment in the story, consider this carefully. If you were Arden and discovered messages like these between your husband and your assistant, would you confront them immediately, or would you stay quiet and watch what happens next? Tell me your answer in the comments. A few minutes later, Arden entered the penthouse overlooking the skyline. Nicholas had not returned home yet. She placed her bag on the counter and waited, because soon the door would open, and Nicholas would walk inside, unaware that the truth had already reached her. The penthouse remained quiet as Arden waited. The city stretched beyond the tall windows, its lights reflecting across the dark river below. Traffic moved steadily through downtown Chicago, while distant horns echoed between the buildings. Inside the apartment, only the ticking of the wall clock broke the silence. Nearly an hour later, the elevator doors opened. Moments later, the front door unlocked, and Nicholas Foster stepped inside. He removed his jacket casually as he entered the living room. "Arden?" he called. She stood near the window, her posture straight, her expression calm. "Yes." Nicholas walked toward the kitchen counter and poured himself a glass of water. "You're home early," he said. "I finished work sooner than expected." He nodded, taking a sip. Neither of them spoke for a moment. Then Arden stepped forward slowly. In her hand, she held Ariana's phone. Nicholas noticed it immediately. "That's not yours," he said. "No," Arden replied quietly. "It belongs to Ariana." Nicholas's eyes narrowed slightly. "Why do you have it?" "I picked it up at the office earlier." Her voice remained steady. "I was checking a meeting location." Nicholas watched her carefully. Then Arden lifted the phone slightly. A message appeared on the screen. Silence filled the room. Nicholas did not move. Arden continued speaking in the same calm tone. "The message came from you." Nicholas's expression changed. For a moment he looked toward the floor before meeting her eyes again. Arden's next words arrived slowly. "I read the conversation." Nicholas stood motionless for several seconds. The quiet space between them suddenly felt heavy. Arden placed Ariana's phone on the table beside her. "I wasn't searching for anything," she said calmly. The message appeared when the screen lit up. Nicholas ran a hand through his hair. "Arden." The word carried hesitation. He stepped closer, trying to find the right explanation. "It's not exactly what it looks like." Arden's expression remained unchanged. "I read the entire conversation." Nicholas paused. The confidence he carried in boardrooms and negotiations seemed to disappear inside that moment. He searched for words. "Ariana and I knew each other years ago," he said finally. Arden listened without interruption. "We met during a business conference in New York," he continued. "We spent some time together back then." Arden folded her arms quietly. "And recently?" Nicholas exhaled slowly. "She moved to Chicago. We started talking again." His voice lowered. "It wasn't supposed to become complicated." Arden looked directly at him. "Yet it did." Nicholas nodded faintly. "There were meetings during business trips," he admitted. "I thought I could manage the situation without anyone getting hurt." The explanation sounded weak, even as he spoke it. Arden watched him carefully. For years, she had seen Nicholas handle difficult negotiations with confidence. Tonight, he struggled to maintain the same composure, because the truth now stood clearly between them, and no explanation could erase the messages she had already read. Arden walked slowly toward the living room table and picked up the phone again. She opened the message thread and held the screen where Nicholas could see it. "You planned meetings together," she said quietly. Nicholas lowered his gaze. "Yes, you discussed my schedule." He nodded again. Arden read one line aloud. "She trusts me." The words hung in the air. Nicholas closed his eyes briefly. "That message shouldn't have been written, but it was," Arden replied. She scrolled further down the conversation. "You talked about dinners. travel plans, even my meetings. Nicholas said nothing, because there was nothing left to deny. Arden placed the phone back on the table. So the woman I hired to help manage my company, her voice remained steady, was secretly meeting my husband. Nicholas's shoulders lowered slightly. I didn't plan it this way. Arden shook her head slowly. Plans don't change what happened. Nicholas tried once more. It started before you even knew Ariana existed. Years ago. Arden met his eyes again. And now? He hesitated, then answered quietly. It continued. Those 2 words confirmed everything. There was no misunderstanding, no accident, only a secret relationship carried forward inside the life Arden believed was built on trust. The truth now stood openly between them, and neither of them could pretend otherwise. After Nicholas's final admission, the room fell silent. Neither of them spoke. The city lights outside the window continued glowing across the skyline while traffic moved through the streets far below. Inside the penthouse, time seemed to pause. Nicholas stood near the kitchen counter, unsure whether to approach Arden or remain where he was. She walked slowly toward the window and looked out across the city. For years that view had represented everything they built together. Success, stability, a future created through shared ambition. Now it looked different, not because the city had changed, but because the trust inside their marriage had shifted in a single evening. Nicholas finally spoke again. Arden, I never wanted to hurt you. She did not turn around, yet you did. Her voice carried no anger, only calm certainty. Nicholas stepped closer. I can fix this. Arden remained facing the window. Some decisions cannot be repaired with promises. The quiet stretched between them again. Finally, Arden turned back toward him. Her expression remained composed, but the strength in her voice left no room for confusion. You made your choices, she said. And now, I will make mine. Nicholas waited, unsure what those words meant. Arden picked up her coat from the chair beside the table. Tonight, I'm not making any decisions. She walked past him toward the hallway. But before leaving the room, she stopped and spoke once more. Tomorrow, she said calmly, I will decide what happens to our future. Nicholas stood alone in the living room as the elevator doors closed behind her. And for the first time since building his empire, he realized something he could not control. The future of his marriage now rested entirely in Arden's hands. Arden spent the night away from the penthouse. Instead of returning to the apartment she shared with Nicholas, she drove across the city and checked into a quiet hotel overlooking Lake Michigan. The room offered a wide view of the water, where distant lights from passing boats moved slowly across the dark surface. For the first time in years, Arden sat alone without business calls, meetings, or company reports demanding her attention. Silence filled the room. She removed her jacket and sat near the window, looking across the lake while replaying the events of the evening in her mind. Nicholas's messages, Ariana's replies, the calm confession inside the penthouse. Each moment remained clear, yet anger never fully took control of her thoughts. Instead, she felt a deeper disappointment. For years she believed her marriage rested on honesty and shared respect. Those values had guided both her personal life and her career. Trust had always been the foundation of every partnership she built. Now that foundation had been shaken. Still, Arden refused to let emotion dictate her next step. Her entire career had been built on thoughtful decisions, not impulsive reactions. By early morning, she reached a conclusion. Nicholas had broken her trust, but what mattered now was how he responded to the consequences of his choices. Arden stood from the chair and prepared to leave the hotel, because the next conversation would determine whether their marriage could be rebuilt or whether it had already reached its end. When Arden returned to the penthouse the next morning, Nicholas was already awake. He stood near the kitchen counter staring at the skyline through the large windows. The city had begun another busy day. Cars moved along Lakeshore Drive while morning light spread across the buildings. Nicholas turned when he heard the door open. Arden walked inside calmly. Neither of them spoke immediately. The tension from the previous night still lingered in the room. I've been waiting, Nicholas said quietly. Arden placed her bag on the counter. I needed time to think. Nicholas nodded. I understand. For several seconds they stood facing each other. Finally, Arden spoke. You betrayed my trust. Nicholas lowered his gaze. I know. You allowed someone inside my company to become part of that betrayal. He remained silent. There's no excuse for what I did, Nicholas admitted. Arden studied his expression carefully. Excuses don't matter now, she replied. What matters is whether you understand the damage you caused. Nicholas took a slow breath. I do. Arden walked closer. You placed our marriage and our reputation at risk, not just emotionally, but professionally as well. Nicholas nodded again. I will accept whatever decision you make. For the first time that morning, Arden noticed genuine regret in his voice. Yet regret alone could not restore trust. That would require something far more difficult. Arden remained silent for a moment before speaking again. If this marriage continues, she said calmly, things will change. Nicholas listened carefully. First, Arden continued. Your communication with Ariana ends immediately. Nicholas nodded without hesitation. It already has. Arden raised her hand slightly. Not just messages, not just meetings during travel, complete distance. I understand. Second, she continued, Ariana will no longer work at my company. Nicholas looked surprised. That decision affects your business. Yes, Arden replied. But trust inside leadership cannot exist when secrets remain between executives and staff. Nicholas accepted the point. I'll respect whatever action you take. Arden continued outlining her expectations. For this marriage to survive, honesty must replace secrecy. That includes your travel schedules, business meetings, and communication with anyone connected to this situation. Nicholas agreed again. Complete transparency. Finally, Arden spoke the most important condition. Trust must be rebuilt through actions, not promises. Nicholas understood what she meant. Words alone would not repair the damage created by months of hidden communication. Rebuilding their relationship would require patience, accountability, and consistent honesty. Arden looked directly at him. If those conditions cannot be respected, this marriage will end. Nicholas did not hesitate. They will be respected. For the first time since the confrontation began, both of them understood the path forward. But rebuilding trust would be far more difficult than losing it. Weeks later, life in the Foster household began settling into a new rhythm. Arden made the difficult decision to release Ariana from her role at the consulting firm. The conversation remained professional and brief. Ariana accepted the outcome quietly, knowing the circumstances left little room for argument. Nicholas honored every condition Arden had established. Travel schedules were shared openly. Meetings were discussed clearly. Communication between them became more direct than it had been in years. Rebuilding trust required time. Some days the distance between them still felt noticeable. Other days their conversations returned to the partnership they once shared. Arden understood something important during that process. Success in business often created the illusion that every problem could be solved quickly. But relationships worked differently. Trust once broken required patience to rebuild. One evening they stood together near the same window overlooking the Chicago skyline. The city lights reflected across the river as they talked quietly about the future. Nicholas looked toward Arden. I should have protected what we built. Arden nodded. Trust requires honesty. Her voice remained calm but firm. And success means nothing if integrity disappears along the way. The lesson applied to both their personal lives and their professional reputations. Because in the end, no amount of wealth or influence could replace the value of trust. What do you think about Arden's decision? Did she make the right choice by giving Nicholas a chance to rebuild their marriage? Or would you have walked away completely? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoy stories about love, loyalty, and difficult choices, subscribe to Love Tales with Mr. Easton for more powerful stories like this one on the channel.